G'day everyone, Jake Mckeown here and welcome back to Steel Noise Podcast. For this episode I've done something a little different and I've taken my recording equipment around to the home of a dear friend of mine, Lesley Saddington, who is 89 years of age. Now Lesley is an Australian writer and mother who has shared a powerful and deeply personal story in memory of her son Tony Carden. Her book, titled I Don't Want to Talk About It, reflects on Tony's life as a passionate AIDS activist and proud member of the LGBTQI+ community. Aside from writing, Lesley has lived a very eventful life. She lived through the years of World War II and has travelled the world exploring and hiking. A little warning, we discuss in detail such topics such as child sex abuse, the AIDS pandemic, and her experience of loss and grief. Some listeners may find these topics disturbing and triggering, so this is a little heads up. If that is you, or if you have personally experienced any of these such things, possibly you might want to sit this one out. Anyway, I can't wait to introduce you all to my dear friend, Lesley Saddington. G'day, Lesley.
Good morning, Jack. How are you?
I'm very good, thanks. How are you?
Pretty good.
Thank you for having me in your nice, cosy, humble abode this morning.
Oh, you're very welcome.
It's quite nice and comforting being in here away from that cyclonic weather outside.
This bomb cyclone, as they call it, was very scary last night. I wondered if the roof was going to stay in peace, but it did, thank goodness.
Well, thank goodness for that, because otherwise we might have been washed out in here.
We'd been sitting in the rain.
Yeah. But I'm very excited about this. Firstly, because this is the first time I've taken the podcast mobile.
Oh, very good.
So that's pretty exciting. And two, I'm just very looking forward to hearing stories over your years. Generally, I've only interviewed friends and people similar to my age, so you'd have a whole lot more experience and knowledge to share.
A few decades more.
Maybe. Hey, I didn't say it. But anyway, cheers.
Cheers.
Looking forward to this. I've been looking forward to it all week. Right, so...
Nice Pinot.
Yeah, you like that?
Very
Tread
good.
lightly. What is it?
Yeah.
Tread softly.
It's from South Australia, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Good, nice Pinot.
All right, well, to start us off, just kind of give us the early days of Lesley. Full name?
Well, my name's Lesley Jean Saddington, and I was born in a country town called Lithgow in New South Wales in 1936, which makes me 89 years old. And my father was a high school teacher there, and my mother was a nurse at the hospital. That's how they met. And they'd both come from Sydney to live in Lithgow to fulfil those roles. And my father decided when I was a few months old that there was no way he was going to educate his children in Lithgow.
Okay.
With no offence to Lithgow, but he was a high flyer education-wise, so he decided we'd have to move to Sydney, and that happened quite early in my life.
Right.
I think I was 9 months old. I belong to the generation known as the Yes generation.
Right.
Not the millennials or any of those.
Okay.
The Yes generation was called that because they did as they were told. They didn't argue. I won't say they were submissive, but they were disciplined very severely or very strongly, or
right.
perhaps I should say very sensibly.
Yeah.
And I think that's contributed to me being able to cope as well as I have through my life.
Right. Very interesting. And so was Lithgow correct?
Lithgow. Lithgow was a mining town.
Pretty small, was it?
No, it's not. It's a medium-sized town, but it's... in fact, my great-grandfather was someone who helped in the mines when they had to have a deal with a problem. Right. And he was called into the mine in the middle of the flu epidemic, the Spanish flu, to help solve a problem. And he went in that night and came back and said, the guy that was there was coughing. He might have had that flu. I hope I didn't get it. Well, he did get it. And he got very sick, and on the way to hospital, one of the family sat in the car, in the ambulance with him, and wrote his will for him.
Wow.
And that was what used to happen in those days.
And did he pass away
He
from it?
passed away. Oh yes,
Wow.
they all did. The death toll from that was very, very high,
Yeah, I bet.
but nothing has exceeded the death toll from the AIDS epidemic.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing. 60 million have died so far worldwide, and it's still happening.
Yeah.
In
And
fact, we've just got an emergency call from New Guinea who said that they haven't got medications, they can't afford them, and they've got an outbreak that's pretty serious
Wow.
to deal with.
We'll talk a bit more about that when we discuss the book in a moment. But and so when you moved to Sydney, you went to school there. You did all your schooling in Sydney.
Well, I did. I've been to a lot of different schools because we kept moving. Well, the war had something to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been more stable had it not been for the war. We were living in Cremorne, and I started school at Cremorne Public School, but then the war came.
World War
II.
Yeah.
Yes. And,
of course, sorry.
and that changed things completely.
Yep.
It changed things completely because at one point it looked as though Sydney was going to be attacked by the Japanese who were sending torpedoes into Sydney Harbour.
Right.
So my father put us on a train and sent us out into the country to a place called Hay, where my aunt was living, and we stayed there for the duration of the war.
Right. And so how did the war affect schooling and stuff?
The war was very interesting. My earliest recollection of the war was when I would have been probably 4, because I couldn't read, but I had a very irritating habit that my mother couldn't handle, which was that I used to wake up and sing at the early hours of the morning.
Right.
I love music, and I'd always had songs and music in my mind, so I'd sing. She'd get cranky. My father would then wake up and get out of bed and come and take me and sit out on the back steps of the house with the Sydney Morning Herald and read the news. And I would sit beside him, and gradually I would look at the paper and ask what that said and what was that picture. And they were pretty gruesome pictures because
of the war.
They were pictures of war atrocities, largely Japanese and German. Mm-hmm. He would explain it to me. I think he always believed in answering children's questions as honestly and completely as he could. Right. And in fact, I can even remember saying to him, "Why doesn't someone just get a gun and shoot Mr. Hitler?" But in fact, I even thought if I was a big person, I'd do that.
I'd do it myself.
Because I heard what terrible things were happening.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting time because food was rationed, clothing was rationed, petrol was rationed. We had a ration book, which is a little grey, about 6 by 4 inch book, and every time we had our share of either butter or eggs or something that was rationed, we had to hand over a coupon in exchange.
Yeah.
And parents had to learn how to cook with what they had, not with what they'd like to have.
Right.
It was a very interesting time. And when we went to live in the country, that was completely different. It was wonderful. I got to see what country life was like, and I really quite enjoyed it. We lived very close to the Murrumbidgee River in Hay, and it used to flood. And the floods would come up as high as our back garden. So our back garden, which was only orange clay, there was no lawn, you couldn't grow lawn out there, it would just become covered in water, turned into a lake. So we had a lot of fun out there.
Wow, I bet.
And we used to ride our bikes. I was only 6 by then, but I had a bike to ride with my 8-year-old cousin. And we'd ride down through Hay, and we'd look underneath the old pub, and we'd see these eyes shining at us, and my cousin would say, they're German spies, those eyes, did you know that? And I didn't know that. So but I learned later that they were actually cats.
Oh, right. Yeah, okay. Interesting.
But life was interesting in Hay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You've told me just earlier this week, actually, you were talking about your father had something to do with keeping the lights off in Sydney.
Yes, well, he was going to. He applied to enlist for the war, which nearly every man in Australia was doing, and he was knocked back because just around that time he developed on the back of his hand quite a big lump, which was called a ganglion.
Right.
And they said, well, you wouldn't be able to hold a gun.
Okay.
So you can't go to the war, but we need people here in Sydney because we have to have a lot of help to keep the people here safe. So he had to go walk through streets of Sydney at night to make sure that every window was covered with the black cardboard that had been issued to residents of Sydney, and that there was no escape of any light whatsoever because the Japanese planes would fly over and they took down all the road signs so that if the Japanese did manage to get into Sydney, they wouldn't know where they were.
Mm-hmm.
And he did that and helped load ships that had to go back to the war. So he was called a war warden.
War warden.
And he stayed in Sydney and did all that throughout the war.
Wow.
While we were in Hay.
So, I mean, no street lights, no light whatsoever.
No
It's
light
pitch black
whatsoever.
during the night.
Yeah, all right inside the house as long as you had your windows completely
Just had to have them boarded.
sealed up.
Right.
Yes.
Far out.
And then you'd see searchlights in the sky waiting to get the Japanese planes and hopefully shoot them down.
Oh, right. So Australian searchlights, you mean?
Yes, Australian searchlights from
Right.
Sydney.
Wow, that is full on.
Mm.
And was there ever a threat of war? Was there ever any incidents that happened while you're living in Sydney? Or
Well, the worst incident was when the Japanese came into Sydney Harbour and let off those torpedoes.
yeah,
The
the submarine, is that right?
It was a submarine, Japanese submarine. They found it many, many years later because they'd got it and they thought they'd sunk it, but it wasn't in the harbour. It got away, and it had got away somewhere up the Central Coast where they finally found it decades later.
Wow.
Yes. And I think the Japanese were quite happy to commit suicide during the war. They were called kamikaze pilots, and they would just do what they had to do and sacrifice their life as the cost of it.
For the cause, yeah.
Yes. I
Wow.
don't think we were quite that way oriented.
No, it's pretty pretty savage, isn't it?
Anyway, that was the scary thing. The interesting thing about that was that people who lived in the eastern suburbs close to the harbour, beautiful suburbs like Potts Point and Vaucluse and places like that,
Mm-hmm.
they just put their properties on the market for peanuts and fled. And some of my friends' parents bought properties there for peppercorn cost, and they became wealthy that way. So it was a very interesting time.
It sounds like interesting times. Yeah. Hey, you mentioned as well that you worked in pathology.
Well, that's another interesting part of my story because I did well at school. I went to Hornsby Girls High School. I'd been to our Time and Opportunity School, then I went to Hornsby Girls High School, and I did quite well in the leaving certificate. And my parents said, "Now, what are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to go to university and study medicine because I'm very interested in it."
Mm-hmm.
And they said, "But you're a girl. Girls don't go to university. You'll get married and have children. That'd be a waste of time and money." So she said, "Well, my mother said your brother will go because if he wants to, because he'll be responsible for a family, but you'll just be a housewife." And even then, when we didn't have as much knowledge of discrimination against women, that cut me a bit.
Yeah.
So I got very, very busy and started looking in the papers for something I could do that was somehow interesting.
Related to medicine, I guess.
Well, that's what I was hoping, and I found it. I found at Sydney Hospital they have they had in those days a research institute called the Kanematsu Institute of Research and Pathology, and they wanted some trainee pathology technicians.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, that's a good compromise. I'll do that.
Oh.
So I applied and was accepted, as was one of my friends who heard about it when I told her. And so we both went off and started there as trainee. We call them medical technologists today, but it was laboratory technicians in those days.
Yeah.
And that was very interesting. We had some wonderful stuff to do. I'd have to go to the operating theatres every morning and bring back everything that had been removed and dissect it and get slides ready for them to look through the slides and work out whether it was cancer or what it was. And in the process of all that, something interesting happened, which was that the doctors at the hospital said, "Listen, girls, learn to smoke because it's smelly in there in the PM room, and the nicotine kills the bugs and things. We all smoke when we go to a post-mortem." So my friend and I went to the canteen, bought ourselves a packet of Craven A, and sat down and taught ourselves to smoke.
Yeah.
And then we went to the postmortems. And after I'd been to several postmortems, I said to my friend, have you noticed that the lungs of people who smoke are very black and sticky and shrunken, and the lungs of people who don't smoke are pink and spongy and healthy? Why would you smoke? Now that has rattled me ever since, because those doctors weren't silly. They must have noticed it, surely. My grandson said maybe, even in those days, the cigarette companies had a bit of pressure to apply.
Well, yeah.
Who knows? We'll never know.
Maybe
but it was an interesting set of circumstances.
Slipping a couple of dollar bills in the pockets of the doctors.
Who knows? Who knows? I don't know. We'll never know.
Wow.
Yeah. But I mean, those doctors were intelligent men. They were seeing what I was seeing. So it never added up to me. I never put that together.
Right, yeah. Did you stop smoking after that?
Absolutely.
Like instantly?
Yes,
Was it hard to stop?
No, I'd only been doing it for a little while.
Okay.
But the motivation of knowing why I was stopping was much stronger than the challenge of not being able to
The desire to smoke.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. It is fascinating. Even back then, you wouldn't even think that the cigarette companies would have been really
We'll never
propagating.
know that. They may not have. Maybe those doctors just hadn't put two and two together. But surely they'd have been more able to do that than an 18-year-old girl.
You'd really think so, wouldn't you?
You would have. Another interesting thing about Sydney Hospital, which is, and the Kanematsu Institute, is that it was the back of the hospital, and we used to come in down through Hyde Park and go in the Sydney Hospital fronts onto Macquarie Street, and the back of it backs onto Hyde Park.
Yeah.
And
I know that side.
And the gate to the pathology laboratory was at the back, so I used to go down there and go in. And there was a lady that was very famous in those days called Beatrice Miles. Have you ever heard of B. Miles?
I've heard the name.
Okay, B. Miles was an academic, a very brilliant mind, very driven by her parents to do well, and she'd cracked, and she became a vagrant actually, but she wouldn't allow herself to be called that because she used to have a 10-shilling note pinned onto her blouse, so the police could never arrest her for vagrancy.
Could you explain vagrancy?
Vagrancy means, well, I don't know actually in those days, but someone who's on the streets with no money and no ability to care for themselves.
Okay, so why was she labelled a vagrant?
She wasn't, but she didn't want to be and that's why she put a 10-shilling note on her shirt, so that the police should say, I'm not vagrant, I can afford to pay for myself and look after myself.
Oh, right.
So B used to sleep under one of the buildings at Sydney Hospital, at the back of Sydney Hospital. She was quite in a way deranged, but she was with it as well. And she'd come out every morning to the gate when I arrived, and she'd say, give me a cigarette, I want a cigarette. And I didn't smoke, of course, after that. So I tried to talk to her about it, couldn't. She'd just get very, very angry. So in the end, I used to buy cigarettes and just give her cigarettes to keep her quiet. But she was an interesting lady. She'd go down into Macquarie Street. She'd jump into a taxi cab. She'd just run out and open the door and jump in. Or she might get on a tram and do the same thing. And she'd say to the person next to her, 10 bob for every taxi cab I see between here and George Street. And so people would either pay up or get off because she was so dynamic.
Because
she was an absolute personality. She actually drove to Western Australia once, and she insisted on stopping every 100 miles to pay the part of the taxi fare that it was due.
Wow.
Quite eccentric.
She sounded it.
But a wonderful person. She could quote Shakespeare magnificently through all of this. So she was just a deranged academic.
Deranged academic. I was sort of trying to think of a good way to describe it. That's the one. Deranged academic.
Very sad, actually. They think it was because she'd been pushed so hard.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. We got Rosie here coming over for a little pat during the recording.
Well, Rosie's a rescue dog.
She's a rescue.
I rescue dogs, as you can see up there. Yeah. I've had a lot of lovely dogs. In fact, 4 dogs have taken 60 years of my life.
Wow.
Because they all lived to about 15. And now that I'm old, I decided that I would rescue dogs and give back to dogdom what dogdom has given to me,
Wow,
which
that's
is...
good.
And so this little one had been beaten, and she was in a pretty bad way, and she'd been dumped. She had a lot of health problems. She'd never been fed anything but bones, so her teeth were all gone. But and when I just moved my hand, she'd shake. But now she knows that no one in this house will ever hurt her.
No.
And she's a happy dog now.
She's very happy. She's a little bit clingy now.
She's a
isn't
very
she? She
happy
likes a
dog
pat.
now. She's my second rescue dog.
Yeah, no, she's a good girl.
She's a border collie, and she's got one blue eye and one brown eye, which makes her quite a pretty dog, I
She
think.
does. It's fascinating. I was
looks
always
like David.
blown away by that.
Yeah, looks like David Bowie. My son calls her Bowie.
She does look like David Bowie. Little Bowie.
David Bowie might not approve of that.
I'm sure he'd be honoured. Okay, well, what about... I remember when we spoke once, you were telling me about when you played in the quartet. You played piano, is that correct?
Oh, well, my father being a musician, he sent me to... I learned piano at the conservatorium, and then right through my life I've played music. I've played all sorts of music. I once learned, when I was 70, I learned the French horn so that I could play in an orchestra, because I had an ambition to make music in an orchestra with other people, to see it, which to me was the absolute ultimate success with music, and it was a wonderful experience. I played in 2 community orchestras.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't easy. The French horn's hard to learn, and I went to one of Sydney's leading French horn teachers and said, look, I'm over 70 and I want to get to grade 6 music as quickly as I can. Would you help me? And she said, yes, I'll take you on if you're prepared to do the work. So I did the work. She took me on. Got on all right with grade 6, and so then I was able to audition for local orchestras, community orchestras. It was it's a most fantastic experience to sit there with one instrument and hear the whole thing just all rise up around you, this magnificent music, and all you're doing is following the score and just reading your part.
Where did you play in the quartet? What area?
Oh, well, no, this is the orchestras I played in were Ku-ring-gai and Beecroft. Okay. But then other friends, later on, when I couldn't play the horn anymore because it wore out my shoulders, it was so heavy and hard to hold up. Yeah. So I played the recorder all my life because I'd had a recorder since I was 9. In fact, I'd had the first recorder that ever came into Australia.
You had the first one ever?
Yeah, my father's friend was William Mckeown, and he was the director of music for the Department of Education. Mm. And he'd gone to England, and he came back with a little descant recorder. Mm-hmm. And he said to my father, I think this would be a good way to teach music to children in schools. What do you think? And Dad said, I think it's fantastic. Dad said, give it to Lesley and see what she can do with it, because she's learning music at the con, so she'll have a bit of an idea. So I took the little descant recorder and William Mckeown taught me how to play it. And then I went on to the next size one, which was the treble recorder. And then we went all around Sydney doing little concerts and little soirees to introduce people to the recorder in Sydney, or in Australia, really. And it has taken off in schools. It's a very good way to teach children. And then later in my career, when I couldn't play the French horn anymore, I joined up with 3 other ladies who could play recorders, and we formed a little quartet. Now, there's an interesting story about those ladies. Hello. And that is that they were an interesting group. One of them, Penny, was a country girl. She'd been born and bred out near Goulburn. Australian, yes.
Yep. Goulburn, yeah.
And I was an Australian city girl who'd grown up in Sydney. And one of them was a German lady who had lived in Berlin during the war, and the other one was an English lady whose parents were pretty high up in the war control group. I don't know what they were, she never told us that, but she was put into boarding school for the duration of the war. Right. She was there for only the term in England, Dover, might have been Dover. It was in England, and she she had to stay there for the whole duration of the war. Her parents came to visit her, of course, sometimes when they could, but she was there for the term, and then she was there for the school holidays as well.
Yeah.
And she spent many of her nights in an air raid shelter, where listening to the bombs come down, and she could even tell which sort of bomb it was by the whine that it made when it came down and blew up half of London, half of the country. This was in the country, but they were getting it too.
Yeah.
And she had an interesting little story, which was that one day when she was in the playground in the weekend, a plane flew over, and she thought it was just an English war pilot. It was a war plane.
Yeah.
So she waved to the pilot, and the pilot waved back to her, and then she saw the swastika on the underside of the wing.
Wow.
It was a German pilot.
And he waved back.
He waved back.
Hi.
So, I mean, there's a lot of interesting views on all of that. But my friend Margaret, who'd grown up in Berlin,
Mm-hmm.
she had a different story to tell, because when the Russians came into Berlin, they were pretty ruthless the way they treated the German people,
Yeah.
full of hatred, of course, and they raped a lot of the German women and girls.
Yeah.
And so her grandmother taught her to sing Russian folk songs,
Right.
and said to she and her sister, when you hear the Russians coming, sing these songs, which they did, and they were left alone.
Wow.
So they survived what might have been a pretty unpleasant experience.
By learning the song.
By learning German.
They'd be like, let's get him. Oh, hang on a second.
Learning Russian songs so that the Russians would think they were
And
not
respect
Germans.
them. Well,
Yeah.
I wonder if it was like as a disguise, if it was so they wouldn't know they were Germans, or if it was like, out of respect, they know our songs.
No. It was so that they would think they were not German girls,
Okay, right.
I think.
Wow.
Yeah. That was the aim anyway.
That's crazy.
So they were four different ladies who saw the war through, and the Australian girl, Penny, who lived out near Goulburn, she, except for petrol rationing, she was barely affected because they grew all their own food. They didn't have rationing like we did in the city.
Yeah.
I mean, in Sydney, the government even said, if you want to make a birthday cake for your children, you can use some icing sugar, but don't put any colouring in it.
Wow.
And my father, so it was very interesting at the time. My father used to make toys out of old wood boxes that he got from the
hardware or something.
Yeah, because you couldn't buy toys anymore. A lot of things just stopped coming into the country.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Do you think the reason that it was rationed, do you think they would have liked to have done rationing in the country as well, but there just wasn't enough enforcement to regulate it? Or was they just mainly just focused on the cities because of the denser population?
They didn't need to ration the country because they grew their own fruit and vegetables, and they had their own cows and chooks and things, and they were self-sufficient.
Okay.
They made do with what they had, as far as I'm aware. But I'm sure anyone who needed food was issued with a ration book.
With a ration book, okay.
Yeah, and the same with clothing. You couldn't buy clothing either without rationing.
Did you have to apply for a ration book? How did
I don't know, because I was only a little girl.
Okay,
I don't know how the government issued them, but
I wonder.
I know that everyone had them.
Yeah, I wonder.
Mm.
Very interesting. Well, you are an author.
That's
correct?
Right.
You've actually gifted me one of your books, signed by yourself. And this is it here, right? Correct?
Yeah, this is my book.
Yeah.
This is my book.
To be truthfully honest, I've read a few pages, but at the moment I've been extremely busy keeping up with the podcast and doing stuff, but I'm about to go overseas, and that will be one of the items in my suitcase. I'll be taking that when I have some spare time. I'll be able to read.
Well, I hope you'll enjoy it, because the feedback I've had from so many people say, couldn't put it down, made me laugh, made me cry. Think it was a good read.
Right.
But I also was given a recognition by the New South Wales government for the fact that I had written about the long-term effects of childhood sexual abuse.
Yeah. Do you want to explain a little bit
about
what the book's about?
That's basically, it's about two things, this book. It's the story of my son.
Yeah.
It's also the history of Australia's AIDS epidemic, which is as written from a mother who went through it with her son.
Yeah.
So those two things I don't think either of them have really been done before.
Yeah.
The sexual abuse took place early in his life. He was, my husband was a builder. We built spec houses in Sydney's north side.
Yeah.
And Keith found out that if we lived in one of the houses, we didn't have to pay tax on the profit.
Right.
So he developed the habit of moving us from one house to another every couple of years, which got up my nostril a bit. I got a bit tired of it, but I went along with it because I see where he was at, until it got to the point where the children would have to change schools if we moved from one suburb to another, because local schools in those days would only accept students within the same area. So I said to Keith, look, we can't do it anymore because I won't have them. They've got to have continuity of education. I won't have them changing schools.
Yeah.
And he said, that's easily solved. I'll just send them to private schools. And he did. He sent them to a Sydney private school on the north side.
Was it a boarding school?
Oh, they do have boarders. It's a very well known boys' school up at Wahroonga. I'm not going to mention its name here, but it's
okay.
Because when I wrote the book, I had to take it to a barrister to have it all checked.
And the name had to be removed?
I had to use pseudonyms for everybody that was to do with that organisation, including the organisation. I gave the school another name. Yeah. And even then, there were a few people who possibly could sue me, but it was the Royal Commission into Childhood Sexual Abuse and the way institutions handled it that caused me to write this book. And my son came home from school one day when he was about 10, in a most terrible... We didn't come home, I picked him up, and he was ashen. He looked so horrified and sick, and he could barely talk. And I said, what's wrong? And he said, I don't know. And I thought, well, maybe he's sick. Maybe he's getting the mumps or the measles or something like that. I took him to the doctor. The doctor said, we kept asking him what was wrong, and in the end, I don't know changed to I don't want to talk about it, which is why that's what the book is called. I don't want to talk about it. Right. He only said it about two things in his life. Yeah. He said it about child sexual abuse, and he said it when he realised that he'd been infected with AIDS.
Right.
Now, an interesting thing about that little connection is that the teacher at the school who abused Tony abused many little boys over a period of time, and those boys' lives, like Tony's, would have been completely... In fact, some killed themselves. And when I listened to the Royal Commission, I found that the boys who'd been abused as little children at school did one of three things. They either killed themselves, which Tony tried to do. He tried to kill himself when he was 9. When he was 11, sorry.
That's horrific.
Yes, he tied himself he tied something round his neck and got up high on the back of my daughter's bed, which was a very high bed, and threw himself off. But my other son caught him and went in and said, What are you doing? What's wrong? What's happened? Yeah. Anyway, he saved him. Wow. Tony didn't succeed, and then instead of remaining suicidal, he became very, very angry about any abuse of anybody who was vulnerable. And for the rest of his life, he became an activist and stood up for people. In fact, there's a street named after him in Canberra for his contributions to activism and social reform. Wow. Because he did achieve an enormous amount. But as I was saying, I've gone off at a tangent, I followed out of interest the history of a lot of those little boys who'd been abused, and I found that a very large percentage of them died of AIDS, and that was because sexual abuse had spoiled their sexuality.
Yeah, sorry if this is prying too much, but did he contract AIDS, would you say, from that teacher?
No, because AIDS wasn't there when Tony was little, but he did contract something else. Now, this is very interesting. it's very interesting because having done pathology enabled me to sort this out. When people get AIDS, they very often start off with a condition called Kaposi sarcoma. It's a cancer of the skin that gives you big purple lumps all over your body. Mm. It then spreads through your body as cancer does.
Right.
And so Tony had that, but I'll go back further than that. At the Royal Commission, Philip and I were sitting listening to the Royal Commission, and then when they started to talk about my son, about Tony...
Sorry, one sec. Who was Philip?
Philip is my son, Tony's brother.
Okay, right.
I had 2 sons and 2 daughters.
Sorry, yep. Continue.
And I still have 1 son and 2 daughters. And at the Royal Commission, I was sitting at home listening to it. In fact, I could have gone there, but I didn't realise at the time. I saw an advertisement in the paper that said anyone interested in appearing at this commission or with any interest in this commission, please apply online. And not online, by letter. And I did that. And when they rang me and said, "Would you like to appear?" and I thought, they said you'd have to get your own solicitor and do it. And I just felt incapable of doing that, and I didn't know what I had to contribute until it was all over. So I.
Was this before your son's passing?
Oh yes, this was. Oh no, this was after he'd passed. The Royal Commission was in 2014.
Oh, okay. Yep.
And Tony died in 1995.
Right.
So it was years later. Now, when he died, the school, which I now know was responsible for his death, really.
Yeah.
They between then and before the Royal Commission came up, they started inquiring about what people knew, and a few people from the school came to me. When, for example, one lady who had been the school secretary rang me one day and said, "I've just heard your son's died," and that was 14 years after he'd died, when the Royal Commission was coming. Mm-hmm. And I said, "Look, that's a long time ago, but thank you, but it's a long time ago for you to find out now." She said, "Oh, it's just that I'd like to talk to you about him, and I'd just like to remember those lovely days." And I immediately smelled a fish. I smelled a rat, actually. And so I agreed to find out what she was up to. And it became quite clear to me what she was up to. She was really trying to gag me, to tell me to please don't say anything, and also to find out how much I knew. I knew a lot. Mm-hmm. I knew enough to cause a lot of trouble.
Yeah, of course.
And if I gone to the Royal Commission and told them what I knew, it would have made it even harder. But the other thing about that Royal Commission is that many people were found guilty. None were ever charged. Oh, sorry. Yes, some were charged. 2 or 3 were charged, but the main ones, the one who abused Tony and abused all those little boys, dozens of them over a period of a long, long time at this school, he was never charged.
Right.
Not at that time. And he went to live in another place. In fact, I used to think someone should just get a gun and go and shoot that man.
Yeah.
If he's still doing what he was doing to my son.
For sure.
Anyway, the school started putting out feelers after the Royal Commission to me saying, what are you going to do? Are you going to sue the school? You should sue the school. You can get quite a lot of money for what you and your son have been through. And I wouldn't touch money that was given to me in exchange for my son's life. So I decided to write a book.
Yeah.
And that was my vengeance. After all, the word is more powerful than the sword, if you've heard that before.
I have.
Yes. So I've written this story about Tony's life. It's an interesting story because, as I was saying earlier, there were 3 things that happened to to boys that had been sexually abused. A number of them committed suicide. Another large percentage had their lives completely ruined. They couldn't keep down a job. They couldn't hold down a relationship. They'd get onto drugs and alcohol. And another group left the country, just completely abandoned Australia, and Tony was one of them.
Yeah.
Now, he was a very, very good actor. He was given very leading roles at this pretty prestigious school, to the point where he won the NIDA Young Actor of the Year award, and so he had a free scholarship to go to NIDA, and he'd become a great actor in Australia.
Wow.
But because he'd been abused, he chose to go to America. Well, I put two and two together and think that's probably what was behind his desire to flee.
Yeah.
So he went to America. He studied acting at the Lee Strasberg School of Acting, which is the famous one that have done many of America's great film stars were trained there. And he was doing very well in America. He actually got the lead on an off-Broadway show.
Wow.
And when that happened, I went over to see the show and to encourage him. And he'd done Shakespeare in the Park. He was still getting some good places in America.
Mm.
And then one of the boys that had been abused by the teacher in Sydney, who had been his very best friend when he was at this school, got AIDS. He was one of the very first people in Australia to get AIDS, and his mother was a lovely lady. His father was quite a well-known Australian surgeon that I won't name names, but he was held in very high esteem at a certain large hospital in Sydney. And her son said to me, "I want to see Tony before I die. Do you think he'd come back to see me?" And I said, "Well, I'll do my best to ask him back, Andrew." And so I did. I rang Tony and said, "Look, Andrew," when I told him what had happened, Tony said, "But he couldn't get AIDS in Australia." But I've worked out how that happened. It was a very interesting connection. And I'll tell you what that was. Andrew only had one partner, and his partner was someone he'd met working on the Sydney to Perth train as chefs. They both had become chefs, and they were working in that, and they became a partnership. But the guy who was working on the train had previously been an air steward, and he'd worked on the San Francisco Australia line, and he would have picked it up in one of the very, very beginning of the AIDS epidemic, because that's where it started with an airline steward who flew into San Francisco.
Wow.
So this guy would have known that system. He's probably had a one-night stand or something, and he's got AIDS, and then he had no idea he had it.
Was it, I'm not very well educated on it, was Andrew a homosexual? Was it purely spread amongst the homosexual community at the time? It was, right?
Well, mainly. It was also spread to women, but by bisexual husbands.
Right.
So that was how that happened. And then it was any child that was the result of anything like that was born with AIDS.
Was born with it.
In fact, there was a little girl called Eve Gruffhurst who had got AIDS from a blood transfusion, because in the very early days it was carried through blood, and everybody who donated blood was unaware that AIDS could be contaminated. If the donor had AIDS, the blood could be contaminated.
Wow.
So a number of people got AIDS from blood transfusions, and this little girl got it. She was only 4.
Goodness me.
She went to go to kindergarten, and there was a huge, terrible discrimination outcry. They hounded her out of the country, basically. Her parents took her to New Zealand in the end.
Wow.
Because no kindergarten in Australia would have her.
Would have her because of that?
No, because she had AIDS.
Oh,
and it was very difficult, because I was working for the Department of Agriculture at the time, and we knew that you had to be very, very careful with blood, and sometimes we had to deal with in different ways. And so I was nervous. The whole community was nervous about it. In fact, we had the government. It did 2 of these anti-discrimination AIDS campaigns. Yeah. One of them was called the Grim Reaper, and they put a television campaign on Australian television for a long period of time so that everyone saw it in the end, in which this particular early one, the Grim Reaper came in, and the Grim Reaper, have you heard of the Grim Reaper?
Yeah, I have.
Yes, well, with his big
knife.
yeah.
Scathe,
yes, and killing people, and he appears knocking down a lot of men, women, children, babies, and the message from the campaign was, be very, very careful, anyone can get AIDS.
Right.
And so that scared the living daylights out of everyone. But my son got cross about that because it also gave the gay community, the homosexual men, it was very discriminatory toward them. People were treating them very, very badly. So Tony's main, one of his main angles in working for the AIDS epidemic was to fight discrimination. And he did that with Clover Moore. Clover Moore and he became very close buddies. Mm-hmm. In fact, Clover Moore came and spoke at this book launch.
Clover Moore?
Clover Moore was the Lord Mayor of Sydney.
Oh, okay.
Yes. She wasn't in those days, she was the local member, and she had her what do you call it? The area where she was the local member.
District, maybe?
District. Her district was Darlinghurst and all through there, up to Bondi, and instead of putting her, having her office in nice Bondi Beach or somewhere a little bit more up market, she set up right in the middle of Darlinghurst, where people were dying. They had no medications. The government, we had something. The pharmaceutical board had a ban on any drugs coming into the country that had been trialled and proven successful, unless they were trialled here for an extra 2 years.
Right.
Now, when AIDS struck people, they'd be dead within a year if they didn't get medication, and they weren't very many medications to get. So it was because of something called they had a morning sickness drug that they'd given people that had deformed a lot of babies. So they were a bit paranoid about approving drugs.
Okay.
But in the meantime, Australian people were just dying because they had nothing to give them, and the only place that had the drugs was America. They'd had the disease to deal with much more earlier than we had. So they started bringing in an occasional drug, and the first one they had, AZT, everyone had to go on that, but it had some horrendous side effects, and all it would do was delay the onset of the serious side effects. So Tony made one of his big priorities getting drugs into the country for people that needed them. And
like almost like have you seen that show, The Dallas Buyers Club?
He went there and he spoke to the people who'd run the Dallas Buyers Club.
Really?
Meanwhile, ACON, the AIDS Council of Australia, got in touch worked with the pharmaceuticals company organisation, and the pharmaceuticals board agreed that if people had a valid prescription, they could have it filled overseas. But of course, who could go overseas? Right. But Tony did, and my son Phil, Tony's brother, who had a pretty well-paying job, used to give him a ticket, buy a ticket for him. Tony would take an empty suitcase and a whole lot of people's prescriptions over there, and go to the sources where the Dallas Buyers Club fellow had the drugs, and bring them all home to help save people's lives here.
Save people's lives. Wow.
Yeah. Well, it only prolonged their lives.
Is that the Australian? It was just Matthew McConaughey. Almost.
The guy who acted in
it
was. There were other people doing it.
Yeah,
there are other people doing it because then people managed to get prescriptions, bring them into ACON. ACON had to be very careful what they did, so they didn't actually hand people things. They left them there for people to get.
Yeah,
and it all worked beautifully.
You happened to just find that there, did you?
Yes. Well, that little 100 prescriptions.
Oh, that little strategic. Oops, we happened to leave it at the front door. Sorry.
Anyway, that's what happened.
Wow.
And
that's insane.
So he went over there. I remember I took him in once to get on the plane, and two of his carers, he had some carers that helped him with. He didn't want to come home and live with me when he was sick. He wanted to stay where he was in the community that he knew, and so he came to me and said, look. One of the carers is an air hostess. If Tony needs to get tickets to go overseas, she'll probably be able to help him get them. And that's how he managed to get the tickets when he needed them.
Right.
And he knew that they knew him there. So I took him into the airport. We got in there. He said, now look, I'm just going to the gents. I'll be back in a minute because I think I'll get upgraded to first class if I do this. Came back beautifully dressed, like in a business suit with collar and tie. Got upgraded to first class. So he did it in style.
Yeah. Oh well, it sounds like he was a bit of a.
He was a character.
Bit of a character and a bit of a crusader for the cause.
He was an absolute character. What he did was join an organisation called ACT UP, which is the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power. And they were able to put on big protests, which got a lot of publicity. And in the end, through what Tony did, because he'd learned acting, he wasn't just going to go around waving a banner and shouting. He was going to put on theatrical performances. So when the health minister in New South Wales would not give them beds, they just didn't have enough beds for people, and they were having to go home and die because they couldn't get into a hospital bed.
Yeah.
And he got... in fact, I took Tony to hospital twice, and they... when he told them he had AIDS, they put him onto a stretcher and put him down the back of the hall with anyone else who had AIDS and didn't want to touch them.
Yeah,
right. They could easily die. I mean, Tony had pneumonia at one stage.
Yeah.
So at that stage, I called his good friend. He's good. Who was? They were all buddies with Clover. He rang Clover. Clover rang the health minister. She said, "If you don't get in there to this hospital and look what's going on right now and get more beds, it'll be in the paper in the morning." And so that way he got pretty upset. And then Tony, when he got better, came out and decided on a very good protest that might just swing it in the right direction. So he. With all his ACT UP friends and a few other influential people he knew in the hospital and various things, he put on a protest called the 100 Beds demonstration, and they set up 100 hospital beds with blood transfusion stands, doctors and nurses who were volunteers dressed in doctors and nurses uniforms, and on the front lawn of the health minister's house.
Wow.
And they were all ready to go. They marched from the station out there because Tony and his friend went and checked it all out beforehand. They had volunteers, lots of volunteers to dress up as patients and other volunteers to dress up as doctors and nurses. They had some inside ability to get into the storage department of St Vincent's Hospital and get out all these beds and all these blood transfusion stands and things in the middle of the night with trucks because someone had accidentally left the door unlocked.
Yeah.
And they got the beds. Tony had an interview with the minister 3 weeks later, and they got the beds.
Wow.
And other than that, people were just dying because they couldn't even put them into a hospital bed.
Right. Yeah.
It was very sad. And then another little friend of Tony's. She wasn't little, a young lady who, Amelia Menai, her name was. Amelia had got AIDS because her husband didn't realise that he'd had it from some experience earlier in his life. They were married, they were happily married, and then he realised he had AIDS and he got very sick. She nursed him, and then she realised that he had given it to her. Now, she was one of the very few women earlier in the epidemic to get it. A lovely girl. And so she lived with it until she started getting quite sick. And one day when Tony was very ill in hospital, in fact he was dying, I was sitting there in the waiting room while people went to visit him, and Amelia turned up, lovely pretty girl. She went in to visit Tony, and a lady was sitting in the waiting room with the same lovely blonde fluffy hair that Amelia had. And I said, would you be Amelia's mother? And she said, oh, yeah, the hair gives it away, doesn't she? I said, yes. I said, what are you doing here? She said, oh, I'm just visiting. I've come from England. I said, that's lovely. How long are you staying? She said, until the end. I said, the end of what? She said, well, Amelia has decided to self-deliver. You know what that means?
I don't know.
Well, commit suicide. Basically, now this is a huge thing that happened during the AIDS epidemic, and there was an organisation in Sydney called the Australian Euthanasia Society, something like that. Yeah. Somehow, I presume it was ACON, got together with them, and they put out didn't put it out, they made available a little book telling people how they could self-deliver, because death from AIDS was very, very, very horrific, yeah. Actually horrific. Tony wouldn't self-deliver, so that I know that from experience. But
yeah, far out.
What happened was they had to be able to get hold of the medication that would enable them to die, which would either be pills or an injection.
Right.
That wasn't easy, because all of that was against the law.
I bet, yeah.
Someone within the gay community that I know quite well, actually, he had a very good career. He dropped his career, went off and did a short-term nursing course, and made himself available to be the person who went to help people get set up to do this.
To self-deliver.
And the law was such that they were not allowed to know anyone who had any connection to them would have been guilty of a crime.
Right, yeah, of course.
So this guy had to act incognito.
Yeah.
What would usually happen would be that the person who was dying, and when they got to the stage of having some pretty awful symptoms, including blindness and things, they'd have a party with their friends, and they'd tell them what was happening, and their friends would come to say goodbye, and then their friends would have to leave the room while the person did what they had to do on their own and die. Now that was pretty horrific. It was horrendous. Yes. But the even more horrendous thing that I discovered when I was researching for this book is that I found a PhD that had been done to discover what percentage of the community had self-delivered, and it was 64%.
Far out.
So 64% of the deaths from AIDS in those days were by people who voluntarily committed suicide before dying.
Wow.
Yeah, of it. Yeah.
Jeez.
So it was it was a horrific thing. It's now Australia was contacted by New Guinea just recently. I think I said this, and they are having an outbreak of AIDS in New Guinea, and they can't afford the medications. So Australia's going to have to come to their help because. But the secret of all of this, and this is what Tony was largely responsible for, was safe sex, the safe sex message.
Yeah.
So he used to go around, to begin with, he went around doctors and dentists and things to talk about dealing with AIDS patients safely. Right. So you didn't catch it from blood or whatever. Mm-hmm. But he went to schools, a lot of Sydney schools, and he must have saved a lot of lives of school kids, because he'd go in and teach them about safe sex. Right. And and they wrote letters, many letters I've had back from children, people who learned that message and probably had their lives saved. Mm-hmm. He used to go in there and say, he'd stand up in front of the school kids, he'd say, now, he'd hold up a big bottle of pills and say, this bottle of pills has got 15 pills in it, and I have to take them every day. Otherwise, if I had have taken them every day, I wouldn't have AIDS.
Right.
But I didn't. He said if I had one, he said I take them every day because I'm trying to stay alive. Yeah. But if I'd used one of these, and he'd hold up a condom and wave it round, and the children would all giggle, but they got the message.
Yeah, I'm sure they did. It's pretty confronting. Yeah. Like, okay. Yep.
So I think he did a lot of good that way. Yeah.
Oh man.
Anyway, that was.
That's pretty traumatic. That's intense. I'm sure it would have been hard as a mother to lose your son to something like that. And also just seeing the intense discrimination against the gay community, especially back then. I mean, to this day, right?
The discrimination was probably the thing that made him most angry, and that was his motivation to be an activist. But the other person who saw it, and Tony worked with her a lot, of course, was Clover Moore, the Lord Mayor of Sydney. And so Clover presented to Parliament a homosexual anti-vilification bill.
Right.
This is the very beginning of the tolerance that we now have. And she presented it to Parliament. There was another fellow in the picture called Fred Nile. Have you heard of the Reverend Fred Nile? He was a minister. He was very, very bigoted, horrendously prejudiced against gay community. I mean, he said some terrible things about it. And when the bill was going through Parliament, he of course tried to stop it.
Right. And
because he was in the New South Wales Parliament.
Yep.
With so much weight behind them from the gay community, the bill finally got through, and it was presented to Parliament, I think at about 3:00 in the morning. It was the last sitting that it had to be voted on, and Tony was there in Parliament to watch what was happening, and he said, "Guess who rolled in a wheelchair? Fred Nile, all dressed up in his pyjamas, saying he had 2 broken ribs." And well, we'd had broken ribs, haven't we? We hadn't been in a wheelchair with a broken rib. Yeah. Anyway, it went through.
Wow.
So there were the local newspapers in Darlinghurst the next day said, "Goodbye, Fred. Wow. You can't do any harm anymore."
Good. Yeah. So was he in a wheelchair because he was sick?
No, he'd broken a rib.
He'd broken a rib and he was just bunging it on.
He's bunging it on.
Bunging it on for the attention. That's to hope that he could push his voice.
That's right.
Wow. Oh man.
He was an interesting old guy.
That's intense. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I couldn't imagine losing a son like that. But not only have you dealt with something as traumatic as losing a child, how are you going? How are you feeling for time right now? You all right?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yep. Do you need a drink or anything? You relaxed?
No, I'm fine, thanks.
You good? Okay, good.
I will have a glass of that lovely wine.
Have a bit more. Yeah, let's top up the wine. Because, yeah. Are you all right talking about all of this? Tell me if I'm prying too much.
It's fine. Fine. No, I've had... Look, my life has been a tapestry of many colours. And a nice tapestry, to be beautiful, has to have dark colours as well as light colours and happy colours. And
I've heard my grandmother say that.
Yeah.
That exact.
Well, that's what I think makes up a life. And I've had my share of the dark colours, but I've also had plenty of the happy colours as well. Yeah.
Well, I
guess
losing
3 husbands was the dark part.
I was about to say, while we're referencing the dark colours, do you want to talk a little about that?
Oh, yes. Well, that was very sad.
Of course, yeah.
Keith being a builder.
Your first husband was Keith?
First husband was Keith, the father of my 4 children.
Uh-huh.
He developed a melanoma because they didn't even wear hats in those days. No, we had no idea. We'd never heard of melanomas. We'd never heard of skin cancer.
Yeah, of course.
So I have a few myself every 6 months cut off. That's what this is.
Right.
So that's what happened to Keith. And then I remarried. And this man was quite a lot younger than me. A lot younger, actually. And we had a lovely...
Go get him, Les.
It was beautiful. We used to ski and we used to sail and we used to have a wonderful time.
Beautiful.
And he suddenly got sick. He was only sick for 3 weeks. He had aplastic anemia, which is a type of anemia that requires, where the bone marrow stops producing any blood, so you've got no hope, unless you can have a bone marrow transplant. And in those days, they didn't have any bone marrow transplants. Now they have a bone marrow bank whereby people donate their bone marrow so that when people get aplastic anemia, they can have an injection to be matched to them. It has to be matched.
Is this similar to leukemia, or is it two completely different
They're
things?
2 different versions, but they're both leukemia.
Okay, right.
Yeah,
right, yep.
they're they're infectious diseases like measles and mumps. They're not the same disease, but they're still similar sort of
Similar,
things.
okay.
Yeah.
And it attacks the bone marrow. Right.
Well, the bone marrow fails, and then you get no more red blood cells, and so you die. And Jim actually died in, I think it was 3 weeks from the beginning to the end.
Really? So he found out, and within 3 weeks it was...
That was absolutely terrible. It was very...
Oh, man.
Unbelievable, because we were staying in Wagga visiting my daughter, and we were playing with the kids. It was best Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
Jim got a little cut on his leg and it wouldn't stop bleeding, and I thought, that's funny. That's really weird. It just would not stop, and after 24 hours it hadn't stopped, and he got all these little purple spots on his legs, and I thought that something's wrong. So I took him to the doctor, and the doctor said something is pretty seriously wrong, but I'd have to do a lot of tests, and by then it was Boxing Day.
Right.
He said, get back to Sydney and get to a big hospital if you can. He later regretted not having put him on a plane and sent him back. But anyway, I drove Jim to Sydney, during which period I think he almost died.
On the drive, he almost died?
I had my mother with me. There were 3 of us in the car. Well, he was just so white, and he was sort of... At one stage, he said, look, I need something to drink. And I went in to get it, and when I came out, he was just looking very sick with blood around his mouth, and I thought, be lucky if I get there. So we got there to the hospital, and he did live another couple of weeks, but when they diagnosed it, I could hardly believe that anything like that could happen. And then they sent me out in the middle of the night to try and find someone with the same blood group, so they could try to match the bone marrow, because he had a rare blood group.
And how did you do that? What?
Well, I went knocking on people's doors. On my neighbours' doors. I rang everybody in the family. I rang in and they all went into the hospital and volunteered, but none of them was a match.
What was his blood, do you know?
It was O negative.
Yeah. I feel like the O's...
O's common, but O positive, O4 positive is the most common blood group.
Negative is the
the negative factor. That's the rhesus factor. That was what made it difficult.
Oh.
Anyway, he couldn't get it, and he just went downhill very, very quickly. He started getting infections. All sorts of things went wrong. One night there were 3 doctors standing out in the corridor at North Shore Hospital discussing what they would do. One of them was a lung doctor, because his lungs were starting to play up, and one was the blood man, of course.
Of course, yeah.
Can't remember what the other one was, but I went out and said, look, gentlemen, if there's anyone anywhere in the world that can help with this, just get them.
Yeah.
We'll pay for it somehow.
Yeah.
And they said, we've already consulted overseas.
We've tried everyone.
He had aplastic anemia and another disease with it, which they'd never had a combination of before, and they just didn't really know
what to do.
Jeez. So a couple of nights later, they said to me, actually, would you like to stay at the hospital, because he's not getting any better? And I said, no, I'll go home, because I have 2 dogs at home to feed, and they're on the veranda. So I went home, and they rang me at about 3 a.m. and said, look, he's taken a turn for the worse. We want you to come in, but don't rush. Just come at your own speed. I suspect he might have already gone. And when I got there, I walked into the ward, and the doctor said, oh, I'm so sorry. And I just fainted. I've never I've never collapsed in my life, but I could just feel my whole body landing on the floor, and he caught me.
The doctor caught you?
Yeah. That was just a horrendous shock. Because he was a young, very young, strong man who, sailing a yacht out of the Heads and down to Sydney and things like that, and cross-country skiing. And
Far out, man. That is full on.
But see, we've got a cure for that now, haven't we?
It's just, I guess in the older times, people probably could have been saved. That's modern medicine, right? I guess.
Huge difference.
It is, yeah, of course.
Huge difference. The only problem with it, though, is that I think cancer was less common, or else it was just not recognised. But I think with a lot of modern day living, there's a very big increase in the rate of cancer. Yeah.
And what would you say that's from processed foods, or maybe these
we don't
things,
know.
like, who knows? Like,
Could be that. Could be what we're putting into the water.
yeah.
We're putting a lot of stuff into the water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who knows?
We don't know. But it's not good.
It's not good at all, no. And so that was Keith. What was the other one's name again? Sorry.
Keith was the builder.
The builder.
Jim.
And there was
and I've just
other.
Fred was my third husband.
Fred, yeah.
We were married about over 20 years.
Okay.
Yes, and he was another horticulturist. Him I met when I took to designing gardens. That was my second career.
Yeah.
I became a horticulturist, and then I became a garden designer.
Mm-hmm.
And I had my garden in the Australian Open Garden Scheme, and it was good. I used to raise $1,000 a year for charity, which I gave to the AIDS Foundation, actually.
Yeah, right.
And Fred was in the area, and he came to look at it one day, and that's how we became friends. And we ended up getting married, and we were together for over 20 years.
And
yeah, he died recently.
Recently, how recent?
Oh, now it's about 5 years.
Oh, that's recent. And do you mind if I ask how he passed? Was it?
No, well, I don't mind at all. Fred's death. When I first met Fred, he didn't look well. He was grossly overweight. He was over 100 kilograms, and he didn't look well. And I said, Fred, you should go up and have a check. And the doctors didn't have a checkup. You haven't had one for years, have you? And he said, no, I don't need a checkup. So anyway, he went and had a checkup, and they found he had diabetes. Right. Well, he got very angry about that. A lot of men can't take a diagnosis sometimes. No, of course. And he got very angry about that.
Punch to the pride. Very
annoyed. And I went with him to the diabetes organisation at North Shore Hospital, and we saw the dietitian, and we learned what the meals had to be like, and I cooked those meals right throughout the whole of his life. But that wasn't going to suit Fred, and his blood levels weren't looking good, so they called us up a couple of years later, and from when he was diagnosed, and said, look, we're having a special seminar for a few people, they said, whose diabetes are not responding to the medications, and we'd like you to come. So I went with him, and there were about 30 men there. They were all men.
Right.
Every one of those ones that weren't doing the right thing were men.
Yeah.
But some of them had wives with them. And that first week they showed a lot of slides of people having to inject themselves, and what would happen if you got a cut on your foot and you had to have your foot cut off or your leg cut off, and this is what happens with diabetes. And they tried to scare them, in other words. Well, the second week there was 3 men there. None of the others came back.
Because they just didn't want to know.
They did not want to know. And Keith and Fred would not have wanted to know if I hadn't been with him, I think, because he actually died because he didn't stay on the diet. And I only found out a lot about that after he died, because in his study, he had a study, and all the cupboards were full of lollies and bits and pieces that he'd go and buy and enjoy on his own.
Wow.
Yeah. And I said to him one day, because a few people had seen him up at McDonald's and various places, and I said, listen, Fred, I don't think you're looking after your diet. And he did have a lot of problems with his blood vessels and things that were diet related, and that were all diabetes related. And I said, please stay on the diet, because, if anything happens to you, I'll be on my own, and I don't want to be on my own. And he said, look, I want to do what I'm doing the way I want to do it, and I don't want to give up the food that I like, and that's that. And I said, okay, if that's I'll never say anything again. But that's what killed him. And he used to, I never knew this, but when I went to play music with my friends, he used to hop on a train. For 25 cents, he'd go to the end of the line, wherever it was, and he'd go out and find the best restaurant and have a nice meal. He just loved food. He loved good food. He loved, and he wasn't going to give it up. Wow. And that's a choice we all make.
And it is, yeah. Does it? Again, tell me if I'm poking too much, but what kind of effect does that have on you? I mean, knowing that there is something that can be done to kind of take that pressure off the relationship.
That he could have done.
That he could have done, yeah. Was that hard for you to sit and watch, or was that
It was horrible to sit and watch.
Your position as a partner to be like...
I sat in the chair next to him and watching television at night and looking at him and knowing that he was just going downhill and he was letting it happen to himself. It broke my heart.
I bet.
But I couldn't do anything about it. I cooked the right meals and did all that, but
did your best.
He had these little habits on his own, lots of them apparently, which other people revealed later.
Oh, no, unless. Wow. So...
Well, it was almost a rebellion.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess, like, that would have been... Obviously, all these things are extremely traumatic. Like, you've had a life of... Experienced more grief than the average person. Much more grief. You've experienced a lot of grief in your life.
A lot of people do have grief.
Of course, but that's a lot, to lose 4...
It is a lot. It is a lot.
Of the close...
Yeah. I look at it and recognise it as being... a lot, and I know I wear that as part of who I am now, and it will never change because the loss of the son was the biggest and
was the greatest pain.
Terrible. He's with me every minute of every day.
Yeah,
I'll never lose that. But the other thing, I learned something when I was staying in the ski lodge once from a psychiatrist
who was staying there also.
Yeah,
right.
Because our ski lodge had the capacity to take about 4 families, and this guy was there and we were there, and
right.
I got talking to him, and he started telling us about a case that he had recently where a young fellow had killed his sister and he was trying to help the young man, and he said there was always great competition between the two of them, and in the end he killed her.
Wow.
But he said there's one word in life that could have changed that will change all the problems people have if they could only look at it. It's accept. Accept what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Accept the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Don't rebel against it. Don't deny it. Just accept it and try to make it part of your life and move on. And that's
right.
that bit of advice I think has helped me enormously.
And do you reckon that acceptance has been a big part of you dealing with the trauma of the...
Very big part.
Okay.
Yes. Well, I'll never know, but I mean, I don't know whether I have dealt with it well, but
I mean...
I'm here.
You're here, you seem strong-minded, you seem positive. It doesn't seem to have consumed you and taken over, which something like that, it wouldn't be abnormal for someone to be completely consumed and overwhelmed by that.
No, I think a lot of people are, and I feel desperately compassionate toward them because I think I can quite understand how you couldn't handle it. And I remember looking at things that happened through the Holocaust. In fact, I had a friend who went through the Holocaust. She's an interesting lady. I'll tell you a little bit about her. Her name was Hansi Deutsch. She was a German lady. We were up walking in the snowy mountains at Perisher somewhere up there one summer. And there are a few people hiking. People go hiking up there. It's lovely.
Yeah.
And we were hiking up there with our 4 children. And when we came to the Snowy River, there's she looked an old lady to me. She was only 50, but then I was probably in my 20s or 30s or something. And and I went to help her over the Snowy River, and she said, "No, you will not help me. I will help you." Yeah. And I thought, oh, she's a spunky dame. And we became friends. Right. And when I learned about her, she was a Jewish lady who'd been right through the Holocaust. She and her husband had been mountain climbers in the Dolomites, which is a mountain range in France. Mm-hmm. And so they were pretty physically fit and able to do that. And, well, of course, once the Germans got into where they were living in, where they had been living in Austria, they had to go into hiding. So they went into hiding, and they accidentally had a child during that period. So they had a son. Mm. So when the son was a few months old, they decided they would walk over the Alps into Switzerland,
right?
To survive and give their son a life. Yeah. So they hiked right up over the Alps These two people with a little baby being breastfed, until they got to almost into Switzerland, when the Swiss army pulled them up and said, "Can't go any further. There are Gestapos down the road. You'll have to go back."
Nazi Gestapo's waiting for him.
Yep. So they went back and they had to see the rest of the Holocaust out west of the war, out in hiding. Mm.
Man.
And then when she came to Sydney, and when I met her, she'd lost her husband. In fact, I was helping her. She became ill one day when she came to visit me. She and I used to meet and have a Christmas lunch together every year, usually in the mountains, because she didn't like low levels. She liked high levels, high altitude. So we'd go and meet down at that lovely hotel in the Blue Mountains.
Right.
And she came to my place afterwards, and she was ill, and I was trying to help her, and I was bathing her. She had to have a bath, and she was lying in the bath, and she was crying, and she said, "I feel so ashamed." She said, "I do not know how to die." She said, "All my family died before me, and I'm the only one left. They all went in the Holocaust."
Wow.
And so, except for her husband, and he died before her. And that told me a lot about what that terrible war did to people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you think that might have also, looking back on that relationship with your friend, do you think that helped you with
Absolutely.
with your coping, with dealing with your trauma?
Absolutely.
Because you look back at what she lost and you went, there's a lot of people who've lost more, and she was strong.
And I think the people who went through the Holocaust, nothing could compare with what a lot of those people went through.
No way.
So when I think of Hansi, yes, I think she helped me enormously.
Wow.
She was a spunky lady.
She sounds it. Oh, man. That's so full on. But, yeah. And, I mean, not to say this with any disrespect, but you're getting into your later years, but you're sharp as an axe. Your mind's strong. I've noticed every time I talk to you, your memory's perfect.
It's not perfect anymore.
It seems. See, like from experience, I have family members that suffer from dementia and
I know
such things. How do you keep your mind as strong as it is? Like, what do you?
I look at it all and wonder about it. To begin with, ever since that first experience at Sydney Hospital, I have never taken drugs, and I have never smoked, and I've never drunk to excess.
Okay.
So I've been pretty light on my body. I've looked after it. That's one good thing, I think.
Right, of course.
Because I think that that must play a very big part.
Oh, it has to, for sure.
Yeah. The other thing is that I've done a lot of reading, writing, thinking. Mm-hmm. And as I get older, I spend a lot of time now. I read the paper every morning online, and then I do all the crosswords, and I do a whole lot of mind games.
Yeah. Just
to try and when I can't find the word, I look it up, and I look up the derivation, and I keep my brain going, because I've lost a lot of friends to dementia. I have a number of friends still alive, but only one who hasn't got dementia.
One who hasn't, yeah.
Yeah.
And so is it as simple as that? Like, so
I don't think it is, but I think that's a big part to play. I think there is a genetic factor.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I have the genetic factor in my family.
Yeah, well, that genetic factor, but the other things I've just told you, I think would help.
Would help, yeah.
But look, we don't know, because I used to participate in pharmaceutical trials of medications. You know how they do trials. Well, they need people to do part of it. Mm-hmm. So I used to volunteer through an organisation called CARA at Ryde. And CARA got in touch with me and said, look, we're doing some research into something that we think might help dementia. Mm-hmm. And they said dementia's shaping up to be probably the next big pandemic after diabetes 2, if you know what I mean. You know, that it's just going to be a worldwide problem, because so many people are living longer and so many people are getting it. Mm-hmm. But they're going to trial this particular thing. It's called curcumin, and it's just a herb, basically, but it relieves inflammation. I've found it very helpful. I take it now to make my arthritis much better to handle. And so I said, yeah, I'll go in that. And the good thing about it was they gave you a complete brain scan beforehand, and you got. And Fred said, "Oh, well, I'll do it too." And when Fred did it, they said, "Your arteries are all clogged up. You're getting vascular dementia." And he got very angry with them. He said that couldn't possibly be right. But you see, that was the beginning of him of being a naughty boy with his food.
Yeah.
So I think one of the most important things is don't take drugs.
Yeah.
Have a good diet. Mm-hmm. And have plenty of exercise. That's what I've done. And keep your brain active with reading and writing, and not arithmetic in my case.
Yeah. Yeah, because I guess obviously the genetic side of things is going to play a part, but there's obviously preventional things that you can do.
There probably are. Well, that's what I've done, and I don't know whether that's played a part. It's not genetic in my family, so that's another thing that's helpful.
Yeah.
But it's a very sad thing, and if I got it, I don't think I'd want to remain alive.
No, it'd be hard.
In fact, one of my friends self-delivered last week.
Really? That is an interesting topic, because I also have, not necessarily a friend, but a man that I knew who self-delivered recently, and it's legal now, right? If you have a terminal illness,
this man,
you can.
Yeah, this man had. I had a connection with him through horticulture, and we did a few things over the years. He was 98, and he had cancer, and he thought his cancer was in remission, and then it suddenly came back, and he thought, at 98, I'm not going to go through that.
No.
So 3 doctors came and approved it, and we said farewell.
Wow. I think when you're 98, and what are you going to go through chemo again and put your last couple of years?
No, it would have been horrendous, and he was on his own. He didn't want that happening to him.
I think that's that's welfare. Yeah. It's definitely a fair call for sure, isn't it? Goodness.
Well, look, it makes you wonder about life and death and the whole damn thing. I mean, we're just here on Earth. When I was looking at the dinosaurs program the other night, and when I think from how far we have evolved from what we started as, not that it's all been constructive. I think a lot of what we do is destructive, obviously.
Yeah.
But we've come such a long way, and yet we're still only here for, well, it used to be 70 years. Now I'm nearly 90, so I reckon I've had my share.
Yeah, you've well and truly.
Every day I get now's the bonus.
Butt, haven't you?
The bonus. But I'm enjoying it. I've got children and great-grandchildren, and I see them.
Yep.
And they respect me, I think. And so that's something that I think is an achievement in life.
Of course.
Yeah, setting an example.
Of course. No, that's amazing. I mean, I personally see you as an inspiration, just to see how much you can deal, how much you've dealt with, and how you can still come out with a strong mind to be positive.
Well, I just accept it. There's no point in not accepting it.
No.
I had a heart attack recently, and I knew that I felt I was having a heart attack, and I laid there considering whether I should ring the ambulance and go to hospital, and then I thought, no, because I don't want to die in a hospital bed.
Yeah.
I'd rather stay here. And besides that, the hospital's full of COVID. So
yeah, true.
So and I'm quite happy to accept that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's intense, but it's powerful, Les. Yeah. I mean,
that's what life's all about. I mean, life, death, and the whole damn thing.
I'd personally hope that you would go to hospital so you don't die, because we don't need that.
No, I didn't die that night, which was lucky. But my heart did stop beating properly, and it wouldn't beat properly for it. Well, fortunately, one of my daughters was willing to take a day off work and take me up to see the cardiologist in Sydney.
You did eventually go to the hospital, right? Is that when? No,
I didn't go. I had been in the hospital. That's why I didn't want to go back.
Right.
Well, I mean, we have a very small local hospital here.
You do.
And it has 4 emergency beds, and there are usually up to 10 people needing them.
I know, yeah.
It's a pretty complex situation.
It is. It's hard. For a growing town, there's not infrastructure, and the services aren't following into
Well,
other...
I don't think they are anywhere in Australia.
It's true.
I don't think we can keep up with the infrastructure that we need to support the number of people that we're expanding into.
No.
We've just bringing more and more people into the country, but we're not increasing the infrastructure.
No, it is.
So if you had a loaf of bread and it had 10 slices in it, and you had 10 people to share it with, you'd all do very nicely.
You would.
But if you had 100 people to share it with, you'd get a mouthful. That's about it.
You'd all be hungry.
So, and that's basically it. I can't see anything but a lowering of the standard of living for Australia with the constantly growing population. But then they feel that they need to do this for other reasons, so it's a catch-22.
It's a hard one, isn't it?
I don't think it is. I think if you think of the whole of life on Earth and the fact that we've had such a wonderful standard of living here, I think I've had probably one of the best eras to be alive in that Australia has ever had.
I agree.
Well, I don't think we're going to be able to anticipate that will continue.
What brought you to the South Coast originally? We haven't touched on that. I mean, you're here now in this beautiful home.
If you look around the corner there's a photograph.
Yeah, I see.
That lady was my great-great-grandmother. Mm-hmm. And she and her husband, he was a farmer in Devonshire, and they came to Australia in 1841, voluntarily. They met and married, and he became the first person to manage Coolangatta Estate for Alexander Berry. Alexander Berry was the local settler here who did very well and developed the shipping line between the South Coast and Sydney. Shipping.
Is that what the
Coolangatta Estate,
the town Berry is named after? Alexander Berry, right?
Yes.
I've seen the little plaque as you drive past.
Yes. Well, he went and worked for Alexander Berry and ran that estate, and I got interested. I've done a lot of research into his life, which has turned out to be very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Because he and his wife, during the period of years that he worked there, produced a lot of children, which everyone did in those days because that was just the way life was. And they got to a point where they decided that they needed their children to be educated. Well, I have worked this out from looking at the story. Because they moved to Kangaroo Valley, which was the only school in the South Coast in those days. Now that's a hell of a change.
Yeah.
And so he had to find work in Kangaroo Valley to support them.
Sorry, is this?
This is my great-great-grandfather. Yep. Gave up the job with Alexander Berry.
Yep.
And moved to Kangaroo Valley because he wanted to educate the 8 children that he had produced.
And is that what brought you here? You followed?
No, I'm just following because I have history down here. I thought I'd come down here, and 2 of my daughters have settled down here. They've settled down here too. So when
did they settle down here before you came?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whoa. Okay. Interesting. Yep. Sorry, because so did you? How long have you been on the South Coast in
Since 2021. That's
okay.
4 years.
So not excessively long.
Not a long time.
So you lived in Sydney up until then?
Yes.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting. I didn't know that. I just kind of assumed by the aesthetic and by all the images and photos of the country, I just assumed you might have been a long time member of the Milton Ulladulla community.
But it's a good community to belong to, and it's a very interesting part of the world to come to because I met up with someone I was looking for a tradesman, and this fellow had a Scottish accent, and I said, you haven't always lived in Milton? And he said, oh no, he said, I've lived all around all around the world, but he said, this is one of the best places to live. And I said, oh, that's nice. He said, well, internationally on the study of weather patterns and comfort zones, the World Meteorological Organization put together a list of 100 of the best cities and towns to live in climate-wise.
Yeah.
And Ulladulla was on the list.
Was it?
Mm.
Wow, that's fascinating because I always say that this has got the most livable climate
It has. Well, that's
on
proof of it.
comparison to other places. One of the most livable climates on Earth.
That's proof of it. It's amongst one of the 100 places on Earth
I
with
did not know
livable climate.
Very
Yeah,
interesting.
and it is. It's a lovely climate. It's not as humid.
No.
It's a little bit colder. It's not as hot. I think it's good.
I mean, the standard variation of daily temperatures would range from, like 16, 15 is a cold day to high 20s. There's not a whole lot of variation where you can go from 0 to 50 in some places. There's the variation isn't as extreme, which does...
Well, I remember playing music with my friends in Sydney on my veranda, and it was 43 degrees.
Yeah. I think possibly the big part to play is the ocean, being so close to the ocean here.
I think that makes it. It definitely tempers it.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, we'll probably get close to sort of getting towards the end of it, Les, so I don't take up your whole day.
Is that right?
Just would you consider yourself a role model, would you say?
I like to feel that I'm setting a good example for those that are coming after me.
Yeah.
I do, yes.
Yeah. And
I think at first it was my grandchildren. Well, I think they've all done pretty well with themselves.
Yeah.
And now I have great-grandchildren. I have 8 and I'll have 2 more by the end of the year.
Yeah, wow.
Twins. Twins coming.
Holy mackerel.
So I'd like them to know a little bit about their ancestry, and I'd like to show them that life's worth living no matter how old you get.
Yeah. And I think also there's so many teachings that you can offer in the way of dealing with hard times. You know what I mean? I feel like that's to just even when I come and when I speak with you, just seeing how well that you've managed to continue with your life, although you've had...
You don't have a choice. I mean, when I lost Jim, and I've learned within about 3 weeks that Tony was going to die too.
Oh, was it all?
That's when he came out onto the veranda one morning when we were having breakfast and showed me this purple lump and said, "Do you know what that is?" I don't know what that is. And
is this Tony?
Yep.
Yep.
And he was probably, he would have been in his 20s, and I thought, it looks like Kaposi's sarcoma, which I'd never seen one, but I'd read about it, seen pictures. So we got I took him to hospital to have a biopsy done and all that, and and they said, well, you now have full-blown AIDS. Well, and he got that in America, I think, when he first went to America, and nobody knew it was around.
How long did they give him to live after that?
Well,
did they give him a period of time that was like, okay, you have this long?
Well, AIDS has a developing era, which is a few years, and then once it becomes full-blown AIDS, in those days it wasn't very long, about 3 years at the most.
Right.
He went longer than that because of all the drugs he managed to get hold of.
Yeah.
But that was such a terrible shock that I just couldn't. And he told me he didn't want me to talk about it. He didn't want people to know he had AIDS because he said they treat you as if you're dying, and I'm not dying yet. I'm going to do a lot more living first.
Right. Yeah,
so I thought, I just felt so deflated about life that I couldn't justifiably work for anybody and feel I could do a good job. So I decided I'd just do my own thing.
Yeah.
And I went off and did 3 things. I did volunteering for my soul, and I became an Ankali. Now, Ankali is the Aboriginal word for friend. And during the AIDS epidemic, when people were dying, as I explained to you, with very little support,
of course, yeah.
The health department set up an organisation called Ankali, the Ankali Project.
Yeah.
And volunteers went and trained to support somebody with AIDS to the end of their life, because it was inevitable that's what would happen. And I supported 3 people over 10 years.
After the passing of your
Tony
son.
died, and after I felt that I wasn't able to go and just take a job and be a normal person. So I did that for my soul.
Yep.
I did I went and taught classes at WEA, for about gardening and all of that.
Yep.
I did that for my brain.
Yep.
And physically, I joined the National Parks Association as a volunteer and just did bushwalks.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I thought, well, that'll get me through.
It will.
Mm.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah. No, it's inspirational.
I think you're lucky if you've got a good brain, but I think I was lucky because my father, being a teacher, was pretty focused on intellectually things and
intellectual.
Kept me going, reading and things like that.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Do you have any regrets? Do you have any things that you...
I have plenty of regrets. Lots of regrets.
Do you care to share any, or...
Regrets over and over with Tony. Things I could have done that I didn't do with him. AIDS was such a terrifying thing, and he sometimes went to things that I could have gone with him, but I didn't because I had other things to do, and I didn't realise that he was actually going to die.
Yeah.
It was... There are lots of regrets. I can look back, but it's usually regrets that you have in the light of what you didn't know.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I was just about to say then, these would be regrets of just the lack of information or the lack of understanding. That's not something that you chose to do, that then something you regret, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I guess...
I regret most of all that the children went to that school.
Yeah.
I regret that most of all. I should have just kept moving.
Yeah. And do you have advice now, as you're older? Do you have advice for your younger self or to younger people today?
Well, I think my advice to younger people today is to look after their bodies, because their bodies will enable them to look after their brain, and that will enable them to get the best out of life.
Yeah.
So, keep out of the way of drugs and get exercise and eat a decent diet and try and avoid all the rubbish that's around.
Yeah.
I think that's an important thing.
It's pretty...
Yeah.
And what about more in the sense of like intellectually or mentally? Do you have things that you would encourage someone to do to...
Look, I think that music was one of the first things that gave me a better approach to life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because music is the only activity that uses both sides of the brain together.
Right.
And therefore, people who are lucky enough to be given that indulgence in childhood to learn music, they've got a head start anyway.
So you'd encourage anyone to learn music?
Well, I had my father's old piano after they died, and I took that old piano, I had it moved to each of my children's places, and taught my grandchildren how to play music.
Right.
Just simply. And I think that's very important. I think all children benefit a lot mentally by learning music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And music is the international language.
It is.
Everyone can hear a sound and appreciate it all in unity.
I can sit here and watch a pop group and appreciate it, and I can go to an orchestral concert and just sit there and be in seventh heaven. Yeah. Because it's such magnificent creation.
Do you have a favourite genre of music?
Pardon?
Do you have a favourite genre of music?
Well, orchestral music, since I played in an orchestra, has to really, some of it just moves you to tears.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think every music, Artie Shaw said there's only two sorts of music, good and bad.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what genre it is.
Yeah.
If it's good, it's good. If it's bad, it's bad.
If you like it, you like it. If you don't, then... Well,
it's not only if you like it, but usually you'll like it if it's good.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people out there producing pretty ordinary stuff too.
There is. Absolutely right.
Never mind, they're enjoying it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I guess it's also subjective. Some people might think that ordinary music's unreal, but not I.
No, well, it all depends what you say, ordinary music. Strumming a guitar and singing songs, you can be brilliant or you can be
not
just
so good.
Plodding along.
Yeah. No, actually, yeah, for sure. And yeah, no, that makes sense for sure. And When do you turn 90, Les?
Next May.
Next May. So you're 89 this year.
So I hope I make it.
You'll make it. You'll make it past.
I'm trying to, because when I had the heart attack and then had this period of time where I had a lot of problems, and it was saved by an emergency operation just before Christmas.
Yeah, I remember.
I was told to come home and do absolutely nothing for 6 weeks, just nothing at all. Don't bend over, don't do this, don't do that. And I was very careful not to.
Yeah.
But since then, I've realised that it would be very easy to just sit in a chair and read a book and put your feet up. And that's what I feel like I'd like to do. But I try to keep active.
Yeah.
Try to keep doing things. And having your own home and living in your own home helps you to do that, because you have to if you want to have a good standard of living.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you plan to see out your later years? Would you say?
I just don't have any plans. You can't plan at 89. I reckon if I'm here next year, I'll be happy.
How would you like to spend out your 80 years? I mean, your 80 years. Your later years, sorry.
There's only one way to spend any years, and that's with quality of life.
Yeah.
Without that, I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah. Very good. And do you, again, excuse me if I'm prying too much, but do you aim to live out the rest of your days in this home, in this house?
I hope so. I hope I just suddenly fall off the twig. I don't want to be anything else than this. I mean, going into aged care is a big responsibility for everybody, for the family, for the person who's in care, for the government to support you. Mm-hmm. No point in it.
And like I said, I wouldn't have picked you to be the age that you are. I mean, you seem to be maintaining a household absolutely perfectly. There's a lot of people 10, 20 years younger.
There's only one person and a dog in it.
Yeah. But no, it's always it's inspirational, and it's an honour to be a guest in your home and to have you as a guest on my podcast.
Thank you. Well, it's been a great pleasure. I've enjoyed it.
And thanks so much for sharing, opening up.
That's all right.
And
I think it's good to open up because it might help other people.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's inspired and encouraged me for sure.
Good.
And yeah, I just appreciate the honour of being able to come here and
thank you, Jake.
Sharing a glass of wine with you and
Very
hearing
nice.
the stories.
Thank you for the wine. It's good. I'm enjoying it.
You're welcome. But yeah, thank you, Les.
Thank you.
I wish you great health and fortune.
Well, same to you.
Forever.
You'll have more chance of enjoying that than maybe to enjoy it while you can.
Yep. But yeah, thanks very much. And I hope that we can continue our friendship for many great years to come.
I'm sure we will.
And so do I.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Well,
thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Les. And goodbye for now. See you next time.
Okay.